Alright, here we've got simplification with negative indices module. And to start this off, we're dealing with a bunch of simplification and we're using our index rules. So our rules that we're going to go over today to make sure we know all the different things we can do with our indices. Indices are these parts here. To start with, we just better make sure that if you are going to combine your indices, you can definitely do that, but you have to have the same number here. You can't do it if you've got 2 to the 3, 3 to the 2. That won't work. So we'll ditch those numbers there. And let's go through these one at a time. So our first one here is if you've got 2 to the 3 times 2 to the 5, that equals 2 to the 3 plus 5, which equals 2 to the 8. That's how we write that simplified. We don't solve what 2 times 2 times 2 8 times is, because it ends up with a big silly number. We don't care. We just want to write it as 2 to the 8. So our first rule is if you times them together, then you're adding your indices together there. Second rule is, well, what happens when we divide 2 to the 3 by 2 to the 5? Well, it's very similar, but this time, rather than adding them, we actually take them. So it's now 2 to the 3 minus the bottom part, whatever you divided by. So that will equal 2 to the minus 2. Now we'll go on to what happens when we have a positive and a negative indice that we're timesing together. Having a look at that, 2 to the 3 times 2 to the minus 2, that would be 2 to the 3, and then it's like I've added a negative, which is just the same as 3 minus 2. So the answer there will be 2 to the 1, or just 2. The next little thing, I probably need to put another one in here. You might ask, well, what happens if I had 2 to the 3, 2 to the minus 2 there? Well, that then would equal, I'd go 2 to the 3, and then because it's a divide, it's going to be minus, and then it's a minus 2, so it'll be minus minus 2, which equals 2 to the 3 plus 2, which equals 2 to the 5. That's how we'd solve that one. All right, next up, our next little rule that we've got is what happens when you've got a power and it's raised to a power. So that's kind of like you got 2 times 2 times 2, and then you've squared that, so you've got all that, and you've times it by itself again. And the idea is that when you've got a power raised to a power, or in brackets, then you end up with 2 to the 6. They times together, so that equals 2 to the 3 times by 2, which equals 2 to the 6. So you add them if they're just times like this, take them if they're divided. If they're raised to a power, then you times them. And let's have a look at what happens when we've got negative numbers there. I might have 2 to the 3 raised to the power minus 2. Well, that would be 2 to the 3 times minus 2, which equals 2 to the minus 6. Now, the new bit of information you guys got given here is we can write anything that's to the minus. That's like we've got, it's the same as when you write it under the divide sign there. So 2 to the minus 3 really equals 1 to the 2, 1 over 2 to the 3. So that's how we convert between that. You could have, I don't know, 1 over 2 to the minus 3. And that's kind of like you've got 1 over 2 to the 3, which just equals 2 to the 3. So if you've got a minus by minus, it cancels out again. We'll work through a little example now and see if we can put all this together and use our rules to solve one of these. And we're going to do it for 2 to the 3. This one here. So to simplify this, first up, you're going to kind of work out that you're going to end up with two different numbers raised to the power. All your 2's are going to go together, and all your 3's are going to go together. And they're going to be like 3 to the power something will be your answer, 2 to the times 2 to the power something. But we're going to have to use our index laws to work this out. We do it the same way we normally work out our maths. We start with our brackets, and we times out, and then we'll simplify. So first up, I'm going to deal with the brackets on the top and the bottom. So I rewrite my next line. I'm not dealing with that 2 to the 3 times yet. And then I times it into my brackets. So that becomes 3 to the 2 times 2 times 2 to the minus 2 times 2. That's my rule there. Down the bottom here, I've got 3 to the minus 2 times 3, because this is going to times in, and this one's going to times in. So then we end up with 3 to the minus 2 times 3 times by 2 to the 4 times 3. Next step is, rather than write these out as little 2 times 2 times 2, I'm just going to neaten it up. Minus 2 times 2 is minus 4. Down the bottom here, I've got 3 to the minus 6 times 2 to the 12. All right. So now I've got my rules, my multiplication part done. Now I'm going to deal with my 2's separately from my 3's. And because this is just involving divide and time situation, there's no powers. Now I'm using plus and minus. I minus anything on the bottom, minus anything down here, and I add anything up here. So I start by writing out my first one, which is 2 to the 3. And then I'm going, because it's times here and minus there, it's going to be like plus minus 4. And then this one's underneath, so that one's going to be minus 12. So this one's under, so I take off 12. This one's above, so I add a negative 4. And that's what I get for that. And then I'm going to go and start with this one here, and I'm going to go times by 3 to the 4. That's where I started with. 3 to the 4 there, and it's underneath, so it's minus 6. Then I neaten it up. 2 to the 3, take 4 is minus 1, is minus, oh, sorry, I've written that out wrong. 2 to the minus 1, minus 13, times by 3 to the 3 minus 6 is the same as 4 minus 6 is the same as 4 plus 6, which is 3 to the 10. Cool. And then the last step is, if I can avoid it, I don't leave minuses like that. That's kind of the correct answer, but normally rather than write it as a negative power, I write it underneath a division symbol. So that would become 2 to the 13, and up here would be 3 to the 10.